Hey, and welcome back to Faith It Till You Make It. So, listen up. I did a thing last weekend, and I debated whether I even shared it with you all or not, because in my head, this is a story that no one really cares about. I know none of you tuned in hoping for my weekend recap, but this one matters. So, listen. I got a new tattoo this weekend. The moment was, yes, maybe a little impulsive, but the tattoo itself has been a plan in the making for 2 years. I went out to dinner with some of my friends, and it only took us one margarita to come up with the brilliant idea of what we were going to do after dinner, which was apparently drive across town to the only tattoo shop and get tattoos. Sometimes I wish podcasts were interactive because I would take a live poll right now asking you all what you think I got permanently inked on my body, and then I would bet my kids' college fund that you wouldn't ever guess it correctly. And it's nothing against your ability to generate some grade A guesses, but I'm pretty sure on your list wouldn't be a fork. That's right. I got a literal fork tattooed on my arm. Not some cutesy scripture, not a cross, not something deeply aesthetic or Pinterest approved, not even some other unique utensil, just a fork. And as much as I love eating, as much as I use a fork daily, and as much as I find a fork a very quality utensil, I didn't get it for any of those reasons. Come on, guys. I'm not some weirdo worshiping a kitchen utensil. Give me a little bit more credit than that. For me, it's not a fork. It's a culmination of encounters with God and when I was my truest self. I have wanted this tattoo for 2 years now, and I have threatened to get it for so long that I just got used to saying eventually, and I felt like I was just gaslighting myself. And then all it took was a night out with the ladies to finally make it happen. So, every year, I go to Mexico on a mission trip with our church. It's this huge event. We bring over 1,000 high school students and adults across the border and unleash compassion to the locals. And for the last 4 years, I have had the unearned privilege to lead a team of young adults on a team that we call Barnabas. And Barnabas in the Bible was named by the apostles as the son of encouragement. He was known for his faith, his generosity, his courage, and more importantly, his ability to support and encourage the missionaries. And in Mexico, that's my role, to lead a team of generous, compassionate, faithful, and spiritually hyped adults so that we can serve our missionaries and keep their spirits lifted for the whole week. Our team works hard, constantly on the run, constantly filling the gaps for whatever needs to be done and praying over people and setting the tone for each and every day we're in Mexico. Even though the trip pushes our team to the limits, we somehow have always found a way to have so much fun doing it and just building our own little Barnabas family that is full of real love and friendship. But somehow organically this inside joke started and it turned into this deeply competitive and traumatic game of hide the fork. We became obsessed with secretly planting a plastic fork in someone's pocket, their hoodie, a shoe, their hair, anywhere on their person, but without getting caught doing it. Just to simply watch their reaction of finding some random fork on their body. This game has run strong for 4 long years. And so much so that we even pack special golden plastic forks with us to bring along for the trip. And 2 years ago, I half jokingly told my team that I was going to get the fork tattooed on me. But if I'm honest, I didn't get the fork tattoo because I thought it was funny. I got it actually because I was afraid of losing something. There's something that feels so magical about this mission trip for me. It's like all the layers of my identity are left at the border in California, and I enter Mexico with what feels like the truest version of myself. When I'm in Mexico, I have this supernatural energy that consumes me. I wake up early, I stay up late, I never sit down, I serve the entire day and rinse and repeat with no problem. Every year on the day that we go back home, I have always said, I still have a few more days in me. I'm not ready to go back just yet. I am sure the energy levels are really just a result of me being an extrovert and being surrounded by 1,000 people for a whole week, but it's more than that. It's like the one place I am free to be me. I am free to be the extrovert, and my role highly encourages it. I'm so rooted in the heart of the biblical Barnabas when I'm there that I live like him for a whole week and I serve alongside others that resemble him as well. I've had people tell me that I am Barnabas in a way that revealed a joy in me and the gifts that God gave me. I worship more unabashed when I'm in Mexico. I dance, I lift my hands, I sing at the top of my lungs, and I am not thinking about what others are thinking of me. I am less conscious of myself and just all around more present with God the entire time. Not only that, but I have been able to watch thousands of lives be changed for good on this trip. I have witnessed and prayed with students and adults who are battling life in traumatic ways, and they come to Mexico and truly encounter God. And it's like I snuck backstage to see miracles I wasn't even entitled to. And when I'm back home, something shifts. My energy doesn't just disappear, but it diffuses. I have to juggle the weight of responsibility. I have to do the adult stuff. I'm weighing priorities. I'm managing. I am carrying things that feel so heavy. And somewhere in all of that, when I'm home, I sometimes misplace myself. And this is where I want you to hear this episode be not about me, but about yourself. Because we all misplace ourselves sometimes. We just don't always have a whole week every single year that screams it in our face, reminding us that there is a spirit in us that feels snuffed out by life. And as I'm preparing for this year's trip, it was like I had a wake-up call. My spirit was awakened again, as it always does in the spring, and it got me thinking, how do I keep Mission Rachel alive all year long? And for me, that's what the fork represents. In Joshua 4, after the Israelites crossed the Jordan River on dry ground, another miracle, another impossible thing made possible, God tells them to stop, not to hurry on, not to celebrate internally. He tells them to stack stones. 12 stones, one for each tribe. And it's not because it needed embellishment, but because humans, we have this habit of drifting, and the memory is going to lose meaning over time in our minds. And so Joshua 4 explains that the stones would serve as a sign, and in the future, when children ask, what do these stones mean? The people would tell the story of what God did. All throughout history, people have stacked stones as sacred markers, and the Hebrew word for it is called a maseba. They signify these sacred moments. And I guess that's the point of a marker, to be a remembrance of what God has delivered us from, to tell the story of God's unending grace and miracles. A marker holds a memory when we sometimes drift from it. A marker is going to create conversation. It turns I remember into let me tell you. The stones that the Israelites stacked, they weren't for God. They were for memory of what God did. They were for their identity of who they once were and who they became through that journey. They were for the day that the miracle felt so far away from them. And what I keep thinking about that is we love stories, but sometimes we forget to stack the stones along the way. And I think back on my own childhood because there are so many memories that feel so far. I can barely recall them. But I want to remember because the story of God's grace is woven in between every single one of them. So for me, I get it. A fork on my arm may look ridiculous to someone who doesn't know the story. But so did a pile of rocks by the river. Without context, it looks like clutter. But with context, it's the story of covenant. Paul says in 1 Corinthians 1:18 that the message of the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing. Think about it. The central symbol of our faith is an execution device. To the Roman world, the cross was a tool to humiliate, and to the Jewish, it was scandal. And to the outsiders, it just made no sense. And yet, to believers, it meant salvation. It became a symbol of hope, a symbol of sacrificial love, and a symbol of mercy and grace. So, yeah, the gospel from the outside has always looked foolish without the story. I mean, come on. A baby that is God seems crazy. A carpenter going against the cultural grain is crazy. A man who is willing to be humiliated and beaten to death because of his love for us is straight foolish. But it's really the greatest love story ever told. And that's what turns a symbol into a meaning. So maybe it shouldn't surprise me that obedience sometimes looks foolish too. A fork as a meseba, a tithe from the poor, forgiveness for the wicked, staying when culture says leave, serving when it's inconvenient, and worshiping when it's vulnerable. Without context, all that obedience can feel strange. But with context, it is sacred. The stones we place along our rivers might not make sense to everybody, and that's okay. My fork may not make sense to people, but it's a marker of Mission Rachel and an incredible God. And maybe part of spiritual maturity is becoming comfortable with being misunderstood by people who don't know the whole story. So, Mission Rachel doesn't just feel bold. She feels aligned with God, with the Spirit of God. She feels connected to God. And Jesus says in John 15:4, "Abide in me, as the branch cannot bear fruit by itself." And that means to be connected, to stay rooted. And the fruit is just this natural overflow of something that is connected to the source. And that fruit is so sweet. I don't think I feel most alive on mission because I'm louder there or I have less responsibility. I think I feel most alive because I am more connected there and I can taste the fruit. I am more expectant, I am more surrendered, I am less self-aware, and I am less managing. And it's not that at home Rachel stops believing. She just stops remembering sometimes. And I know we all do this. The further we are away from the moments where we were most connected to God, we stop expecting. We stop living like God is active, close, and able. And responsibility piles up and our spiritual fire gets pushed to the edge like a candle that we keep meaning to relight. So sometimes we need the markers to remind us of the fruit that we bear when we are abiding in Him. Sometimes that calls us back to not just a memory, but a conviction to always remain in Him. Something that says, don't forget what God did. Don't forget who you were becoming, and don't forget what it felt like to trust Him fully. Maybe faithing it isn't about becoming some quieter version of ourselves, but becoming more aligned more often, to stop forgetting who we were and who we are when we're aligned. The Israelites didn't stack these stones because they doubted that God would do it again. They stacked the stones because they knew forgetting what He already did was possible. And I didn't get a fork tattoo because I doubted my faith. I got it because I know myself. I know how easy it is to get buried under responsibility, to get cautious, to get polished, to get smaller. It's my little 12 stones, just in the form of cutlery. And I know it's funny. It's supposed to be. But it's also serious. Because what God has done in my life and through this one mission trip is serious. Now, there's one other thing about this fork. And so let's talk about the part that I really didn't want to admit when I got this tattoo in the first place. I was genuinely worried about looking stupid. I can't help it. I have feelings. And I knew some people would look at it, and even if they knew the reference, that they would think it was ridiculous and that I lost my mind. And it's not like I was worried in a I need everyone to like me kind of way. I mean, the more people that like me, the better. I do appreciate that. This is more of a I'm afraid of being reduced kind of way. I don't want my complexities to be boiled down into some stereotype or to be made smaller than how big God really made me. Because I can handle people who know me thinking, that fork? Yeah, that's not for me. I can even handle church people being old school about tattoos. And honestly, I expect the traditional churchgoers to be a little judgy about tattoos. I'm not surprised by that. But what bothers me more is a stranger judging me. Because I feel like a church person at least has some indication of my heart and where it's postured, even if I don't resemble the traditional Christian. They know me. They know my life. They know my service. They know my faith isn't some costume. But a stranger doesn't know any of that. A stranger can see a fork and assign their own story to it. And I think that's kind of the pressure that we all feel all the time, isn't it? The pressure to be easily categorized. If you believe X, people assume you believe Y. If you're ambitious, people assume you're prideful. If you're emotional, people assume you're unstable. If you're quiet, people are going to assume you're disengaged. And if you're outspoken, people are going to assume that you're arrogant. And don't even get me started on politics, where one opinion somehow becomes a whole personality profile. It's like we live in a world where people want you to be readable in 5 seconds. And faith does not work like that, especially when the symbols we hold all have a deeper story. People are layered. Stories are layered. Obedience is layered. But sometimes the symbols or the markers look one-dimensional to some. And the real call is our ability to tell the stories of them, to reveal the layers in a way that invites others in. So yeah, I worried people would think that the fork tattoo was stupid. And then I realized maybe part of following Jesus is being willing to be misunderstood by people who don't know the story and to tell the story anyway. So maybe it's okay that people think the fork is stupid, as long as I have the courage to get out of my own ego and tell the story of the fork. I believe that going deeper in your faith is only possible when you are not in your own way. We have to be willing to be bold, and being in your own way isn't always sin like we would picture it. Sometimes being in your own way is shrinking. It's editing yourself. It's apologizing for who you are, and it's trying to meet expectations that you never agreed to. It's trying to be everything to everyone and then wondering why you're exhausted and spiritually dull. For me, at home, I tend to get bogged down in responsibility. And responsibility is not evil, but responsibility can create spiritual amnesia. It can snuff out the bold and squeeze us into contentment. Because when you're constantly managing what needs to happen next, you stop living with expectancy. Mission Rachel, she's expectant. She's not embarrassed about worship. She is not embarrassed about joy. She is not embarrassed about being all in. And I think that's the difference. At home, I'm managing perception. On mission, I surrender it. At home, I worry about being too much. And on mission, I am too focused on God to keep monitoring myself. At home, I can get trapped in other people's expectation, what a good mom looks like, what a good Christian woman looks like, what a good leader looks like. On mission, I am simply obedient. And obedience has a way of stripping away the performance, because you can't both be fully obedient and still fully self-protective. Eventually, you have to pick one. So maybe bringing Mission Rachel home isn't about recreating the mission trip environment. Maybe it's about just releasing the thing that blocks me from abiding in God. The shrinking, the apologizing, the polishing, trying to make sense to the world. And yes, sometimes that means maybe looking stupid when it feels honest. Even though honesty is often less respectable than performance, but it is more holy. So here's where I want to land this. I didn't get a fork tattoo on my arm to remember some trip. I tattooed a fork on my arm to remember who obedience made me. I tattooed it as a marker in my faith and my continued drive to be Mission Rachel, not for 1 week a year, but in my real everyday life. And now I know you might be listening and thinking, okay, but I'm not going on mission trips. I'm literally just trying to survive my job and my kids, my anxiety, and my Monday. I get it. But mission isn't a place. Mission is a posture. It's living like God is active, watching how he still moves in your everyday life every single day. It's living like obedience matters and ignoring the internal voice of, what if I look stupid? It's living like you don't have to shrink to be safe, which means getting out of your own way and stop editing yourself to fit the expectations of others. So let me ask you, where have you been shrinking? What have you been apologizing for the parts of you that don't make sense to someone else? And where have you been trying to meet expectations that you didn't agree to? Because maybe the reason you feel dull or uninspired or disconnected, it's not because you don't love God, but maybe it's because you've been living out a version of yourself that's manageable instead of true. And I think God's inviting you back, not into chaos, not into irresponsibility, but into remaining in him, into bearing the sweet fruit that only comes when you are connected to him, into wholeness, into being the same person in your kitchen that you are in the room where you feel most alive. I don't want to be a different woman on mission than I am at home. I want to be rooted and expectant and obedient, whether I'm holding a microphone, a laundry basket, or a fork. So I keep coming back to the stones of Joshua. Those stones acted as a defense against drift. It was a story of movement, a story of obedience, a story of God making a way where there wasn't one. And if people think that this fork is silly, that's okay. And maybe if a stranger asks, why a fork? I will get to say, let me tell you what God did. And that's the whole point. Where are the markers in your life? What are the markers in your life? Maybe your marker isn't a tattoo. Maybe it's a journal entry. Maybe it's a song. Maybe it's a conversation you haven't had yet. Maybe it's a decision that you keep circling. But I wonder, what would it look like for you to look at those markers and remember who God made you in those moments? How much freedom you carried in those moments and how much faith you held in those moments. You don't have to announce it. You don't have to explain it. You don't have to make it make sense to everyone. Just remember and be that person again. The truest version of you isn't the one that necessarily fits every room. It's just the version of you that trusts God in every single room.